Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Alrighty, welcome everybody to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck, and we are doing Lightroom today. Before I get into the Lightroom, I want to just mention a couple things that are coming down the pipeline. I'll be doing a couple, or actually I'll be doing three workshops with Milford Photo. A beginner's photo walk, which none of you need, but if you know anybody who is new to photography, either just got a new camera or is a little unsure with the settings, this is a great introduction. It's going to be on Saturday, September the 14th from 1:30 to about 3:30. And because it's being hosted by Milford Photo, anybody who wants to attend it needs to register with Milford Photo on their meetup.com page. So send them to meetup.com, Milford Photo. All right. The following month in October, I'm doing several off-camera flash photography classes. Two of them with Milford Photo. They're going to be kind of back to back. It's going to be off-camera flash in an outdoor setting. And this is going to be on Saturday, October 5th. We have a 10 o'clock and a 12 o'clock session. So if any of you are interested in either learning how to control your off-camera flash or need to brush up on your off-camera flash, here's a good opportunity. The sessions with Milford Photo are going to be limited to about 6 people. I think we had it 6 or 8 people, I can't remember, per session in order to, allow everybody to really get some hands-on stuff. But Robert Fiedler approached me about doing a flash class for him, and we're setting it up. It hasn't been completely finalized. I don't know exactly the time, but we do have the date. It's going to be Saturday, October 6th in New Britain, and I believe it's through the New Britain Art League. Once, huh?
It's Sunday.
Sunday.
Sunday on
No, yeah, Sunday, October 6th.
You said Saturday.
Oh, did I say Saturday? Okay, I'm sorry.
Saturday for both of you. You said Saturday for both of them.
All right. Sorry. So it's the following day, Saturday. There I go. Jesus. Sunday. It's one of those days. Sunday, October 6th. Once I get the date and the location, I'll be updating it. And the Milford classes, they haven't quite posted them on Milford Photo's meetup page yet. I don't know what's going on there. I sent a memo to the person in charge to say, hey, when's this going to go live so I can start promoting it. But once everything's finalized, I'll be putting all of these up on the Learn Photography with Duck Facebook page and the events section with links to their respective places for being able to sign up for them. So just look out for those. And I haven't quite had anything settled yet, but there's a couple things that are in the pipes for the Connecticut Professional Photographers Association for August and September. So once I get confirmation on those, I'll let you guys know. Okay. So anyway, that's what's pretty much coming up on for workshops. Okay. All right. All right, we have somebody as iPhone 51. Who's that? Who are you? Introduce yourself.
Hello.
Hey, oh, hey, how are ya?
Good. How about you?
Doing good. I'm sorry, what?
Was I iPhone 51?
Yeah, it's you're listed as iPhone 51, so that's
Oh.
okay. All right. Remind everybody your name and where you're calling in from.
I'm Max England, and I'm from Sherman, Connecticut.
All right, all the way up in Sherman. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
welcome. I know you were here like one time a few weeks back, right? Yeah. So awesome. Welcome back. All right. Okay. If I know you're on your iPhone, so we're going to be doing Lightroom stuff. I'm going to be sharing my screen, but even on the iPhone, it might be a little bit too small. So just realize that tonight's lesson is being recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube. So in case you miss anything because the screen's so small for you, just realize you can always go to YouTube and pull it up on your big computer. Okay? Awesome. Thanks, Max. I appreciate it. All right. So what do we have today? Lightroom has come out with a couple of updates that, really not worth mentioning too much. I think I pretty much covered everything that Lightroom has come up with. So I figured today what we'll do is get into some editing. That way you see the full workflow and maybe get some ideas. Because I tend to do a lot of piecemeal and show you the pieces. Every once in a while, I like to take a break from that and say, okay, you've learned quite a few pieces. Now let's figure out how to put all these pieces together. All right. So by showing the workflow and how I approach certain problems, maybe it'll give you some ideas and things like that. So let's go and switch over, and I'm going to go ahead and share. Screen share. There we go. Okay. All right. And Max, if you want, I know on the iPhone sometimes the signal can lag a little bit. So if you turn your video off, it might help you. Okay, just so you know. Okay. Awesome. All right. So I have a variety of images that we can approach as far as trying to create a little bit of drama or a little bit of interest, or somehow pull focus or pull the viewer's attention to the subject that we want them to look at. Okay. Now, like I mentioned, we've covered a bunch of different techniques. We've covered pretty much all the tools that are available to us with Lightroom. And I've mentioned in the past that Lightroom has gotten so robust over the past couple of years that it's now become pretty much my primary go-to photo editor for I'd say about 90%, 95% of my work. All right. Even a lot of my client work that you would think would require the finesse or the power of Photoshop, I'm able to give my clients a professional finished product just by using Lightroom. Okay. So what I have here is a variety of images that you might take, everything from portraits to, cars at a car show, some nature shots, some flower shots, an event photo. All right. And all of these present their own specific problems. Okay. Now, I debated whether I should include some near misses, I guess it would be the best description, where you got a photo, but for some reason the exposure was a little off, or the composition was a little off, or whatever. But I figure I'm not going to go that crazy this time around. Maybe we'll do something where we take a little bit more of an extreme example of what we can do with an otherwise bad, or what we would have in the past called a ruined shot, simply because digital editing has advanced so much that we're able to salvage images that, in the past were kind of like, I don't know if that's salvageable. Okay. Including grossly overexposed and underexposed images. Okay. All right. So I have a variety of images. So let's start off. Let's start off with something simple, and that's this image of the turtles. Okay. All right. And the first thing that I normally do when I import an image is that I apply a certain number of presets to my images. But in this case, what I've done is I've actually removed everything. The only thing I'm going to keep on, which I suggest you guys create a preset for, is your lens correction. All right. And that is basically just to remove any chromatic aberrations and to enable the lens profiles that are built into Lightroom. So if you are using a camera and lens combination, all right, that Lightroom has information on, in its library for your particular lens, it's going to apply a certain amount of correction, whether it's barrel distortion, vignetting, or any color aberrations. Okay, so I tend to do this pretty much automatically across the board to all images. All right, and of course I've also mentioned that I tend to like images that are a little bit more contrasty. So I tend to add contrast elements into my my import presets. But for tonight's class, I've stripped all those, and what you're looking at is pretty much straight out of camera. Okay. All right. So that way we have a ground, a base ground foundation to operate off of. All right. So what do we have here with this particular image? This was taken at a local park. Bunch of turtles sunning themselves on a log. A pretty common sight if you ever go down to any areas that have wildlife in the water. Okay. This was taken, as you can tell, this was taken in bright sun. So we have a lot of heavy highlights bouncing off the top parts of the turtles on the shells. And you can see that we have a lot of highlights hitting the tops of the logs. All right, so we have all this light just hitting here. All right, and because the water and the subject are all under the same light, we have that same hard light hitting the water, all right? But the nature of water is the angle of incidence, angle of reflection. We're actually seeing the trees on the far bank being reflected into the water. So that darkens the water down, which is kind of nice because otherwise we just have really, really bright light. Also, the angle, the sun is off to the side here, shining down sideways, not directly towards me. Okay. So the first thing we notice is because it is very bright sun, we have a lot of contrast, and the contrast is noticeable by the deeper shadows. All right. And in this case, it's not so deep that it has gotten to be black. All right. And if we zoom in, we can see that we have shadows with detail available to us. Okay. And you can see that I was at a very very shallow depth of field on this one. So this was 2.8. Why? I have no idea. This may have been like one of the first shots I took when I first approached the scene without realizing what my camera settings were on. And I noticed these guys, and these guys tend to be very skittish. So whenever I come across a situation like this, I don't care what my camera is set on. I'm going to grab a shot and then worry about the settings later. All right. And sure enough, as I try to get a better shot, they started ducking into the water. So this is probably the best one of the set here. And as you can see, we have a little bit of blur on that front turtle, but I don't mind because the majority of it, these two guys are in focus. All right. And overall, as we're looking at the entire scene here, you can barely tell. All right. Because one thing you have to remember is viewing distance. What is the viewer distance from the image? And in this case, it's going to be pretty much, you sitting at a screen looking at it. You're not going to be, up close. All right. I wouldn't print it for the reason that obviously the turtle is out of focus. All right. So you guys know me. One of the first things that I like to do is say, okay, what is wrong with this image? All right. Because once you analyze it and identify the problem areas for the image, it gives you a roadmap for fixing it. All right. Or for lack of better terms, fixing it, but basically adding it to your preference. All right. That would probably be better. Okay. So one of the tricks that I've shared in the past, if you are unsure where your eye is going to within the composition, all right, kind of like step back a little bit and squint your eyes. All right. And by squinting your eyes, you're removing all the detail from the image. You're forcing the image to get blurry. Okay. So if you squint your eyes, you're going to notice that we have what really pops out is the shadow areas. Okay. And if you remember, the norm that is taught is light advances, dark recedes. Okay. Typically. All right. But there are situations when that rule needs to be broken, and that is in high key situations where the majority of the image is from 50% gray or brighter. All right. So if we look at the histogram here, all right, we can see that the majority of the image is at 50%. Okay. It's at 50% with the secondary hump in the shadow areas. All right. So the big hump in the center, that pretty much represents all of that water in the background. Whereas this secondary hump, that represents the dark part of the log. Okay. All right. So we have a couple of decisions that we need to make. All right. As to where we're going to put our exposure. Okay. And one of the things that I'm going to look for is what's the interplay of the exposures on my subject, okay, in relation to its background, and on the subject in relation to other parts of the subject matter. All right. In this case, what would we consider the subject? Well, some may say, well, it's going to be the log with the turtles. Others may say the subject is going to be the two turtles that are in sharp focus. Okay. So it depends on how you want to look at it as to how you're going to approach it. Okay. But if we squint our eyes, you're going to notice that there is more similarity between the exposure value, all right, exposure value here, and the exposure value of the highlights val. All right. They're very close to each other. All right. And what's creating the highlight to really stand out is the fact that it's adjacent to a dark area underneath. All right. So we have an extreme contrast of light and dark pretty much dividing our subjects above and below. Okay. The dark areas, if we look at it, the dark areas are kind of against a light. All right. So we have dark against light. All right. And if we actually put this here, all right, we have light to dark to light, which is a great way of separating elements. If you look at any of the classical paintings, especially the Dutch masters in the chiaroscuro style, they were famous for putting light to dark to separate their elements. But if we look here, this is technically dark. Okay. This is technically dark. But the contrast between these two is very small in relation to the contrast between these two, which is greater. Okay. So that presents a bit of a challenge because now our eye wants to go down, but the light part of the water behind it wants to compete with the light part of the shell. All right. So if we squint, we can see the division. But when we're not squinting and we're looking at it, we can see that there is an ambiguity in the contrast. All right. So we can do a couple of things. All right. We can darken that water. Okay. And in order to get the contrast between the water, all right, so we have dark here and light here, okay. In order to increase the contrast here, we need to make this darker, okay. I don't want to go lighter on the shell because we're very bright to begin with. But if we go darker, it's going to increase the contrast. And if we go a little lighter on the dark part underneath, all right, we're going to reduce that contrast and probably balance it out a little bit better, okay? All right, I know this may the concept may sound a little bit confusing right now, but let's play around with it. Okay. The nice thing is we're working non-destructively. So if something fails, if you do the edit and it says it's not working, you can always undo it and try something else. All right. So what are the tools that we're going to need? If we want to lower the exposure on our background and not affect the foreground, all right. Actually, you know what? Let me back it up a little bit, because one of the things that you might want to start doing in the beginning is see if playing with any of the highlights and shadows, opening up the shadows, all right? If that does anything. Yes, no, not really. As a matter of fact, I don't think I want to lower the highlight of those shells. Okay. The exposure is not going to do anything. All right. Why? Because if we look at our histogram, the majority of our image is in the middle. The majority of our image is in the middle, which represents 50% gray, or our 50% exposure value, all right? And the exposure slider, that's our midtones, all right? So this slider targets this. So all we're going to do is we're either going to push it to the light side or push it to the dark side, okay? And in parts of our subject, I want to keep them at that 50%. All right. What I'm looking to do, all right, actually is possibly bring these in a little bit. Okay. So a little bit closer from the edges into our midtones. All right. So we need to look at this in terms of sections or elements or zones. Okay. One of the things that I talk about when lighting artificially is creating lighting zones. And right off the bat, there's always going to be two lighting zones. One lighting zone is your subject. The other lighting zone is the background. Okay. So what we want to do is now we want to artificially separate it here in Lightroom. And how do we do that? With a local adjustment. That's where our masks are going to come in. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the background and have Lightroom create a background mask. All right. And if I click on show overlay, you're going to see that, well, it did a good job analyzing what it thinks is the background by isolating what it thinks is the subject. But in my opinion, I would like to see the log be part of the subject. okay, and not necessarily be classified as part of the background. So one of the things that we can do, all right, is we can now subtract from this mask, okay, with a brush. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make my brush size a little bit larger. I'm going to bring my feather down. I'm going to keep my flow at 100%. And I'm just going to go ahead and erase all this where the log is. All right. And I'm thinking, because, oh, who just joined? Oh, Alan Traffney. All right. Because the reflection of the logs are dark, all right, I don't really want to affect that too much as well. Okay. I may change my mind on that later. I don't know. Okay. But for now, this is going to be my background selection. All right. And let's bring this down and maybe get some of these reeds here, these twigs here in here. All right, not too crazy. Okay. Once I have my selection of the background, what I want to do is I want to bring the highlights down. All right. And see how that works. All right. And you can see that it darkens it, but not quite enough. So I'm going to go to exposure and bring it down. Okay. All right. And that actually is now creating a little bit more contrast, all right, between the background and our subject. Okay. See this contrast here? Dark, light. All right. We've increased the contrast. Now those turtles definitely come forward. All right. Because again, light advances, dark recedes. Okay. So by pushing the background darker, all right. And of course, you don't want to go so dark that it makes it look, fake. All right. We have to keep in mind that light is still hitting that water, but we are adjusting it so that our subject comes forward a little bit more. Okay. All right. Now, one trick that I don't touch on too often, but I suggest that you kind of keep this in mind, is on your keyboard, the backslash, which is usually up in the upper right hand corner. If you press the backslash, what it's going to do is it's going to give you a before image of what it looked like before you did any edits. All right. And then you press it again. All right. This allows you to toggle back and forth and see what it looks like. Okay. All right. And now that I'm looking at it, all right, remember earlier I said I'm not too sure about the reflection of the logs in the water. All right. I might, where is it? Oh, I'm still in the before image. There we go. Uh, I might darken that down a little bit more. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back to my mask, the brush tool. Okay. Remember, we subtracted from the background mask with the brush. All right. So now what we can do is we can erase what we've subtracted. All right. I'm going to bring my flow down. All right. And I want to see if I can just erase a little bit. All right. And because I have my flow real low, Okay, you notice my flow's down to 36. All right, the feather's at about 52. Okay, I can just go ahead and brush out. All right, and if we look at the overlay, oops, where are we? So, background. I think I added too much. Let's go bring this down. Where is it? There we go. Okay. Yeah, sometimes having the show overlay really, really helps. Okay. All right. Before, after, before, after. All right. Okay. Good, good, good. All right. Now, what I want to do is maybe bring up the shadows on the turtles and on the log. All right, so again, we're going to need a local adjustment. So we'll go back to my mask and we can probably select objects, okay, and see if that works. Oh yes, look at that. Oh, objects. So there we go. Okay, and if we show the overlay, all right, so in this case, what I want to do is I want to take those shadows and open them up a little bit. All right, and we open up. Oh, what happened? Mask. Select subject. Did I not select my subject? There we go. Oh. Add brush. Again, it's, yeah. For some reason, it just does not want to recognize that log. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that log in. Okay. And we want to open up our shadows. All right. Not too much, and maybe just increase a little bit of the contrast. There we go. All right. Turn that off. All right. And at any time, if you want to see what your mask has done, there's the little eyeball. Just press and hold, and it will turn it off and turn it on. Turn it off before and after. Before and after. Okay? All right. And I think, I don't know, maybe bring the shadows down. Bring the exposure down. No. Open up the shadows, open up the exposure a little bit. Increase the contrast. Okay. Before, after, before, after. All right. So a very subtle shift in the shadows. So it's not as heavy dark. Okay. All right. What else can we do to this thing? All right. Now, mind you, whatever I do here, there are 10 other ways that you can edit this as well. All right. So my way is not necessarily the right way. All right. I might want to bring out some of this color a little bit more. Okay. So that green, I don't mind the green. Okay. But the orange in the underside of the turtles, that's kind of getting lost. So maybe, let's see if we can go to our color mixer. All right. And in the saturation, we look, what's the primary color? It's kind of like orange and yellows. All right. Let's see what happens if we, oh yeah, look what happens when we push up the yellow. All right. And push up the orange. Okay. Now Now, all right, we see that. Okay. Just like the masks, there is a little eyeball here on all of these panels. If you want to see what the effect does, you can turn it off. All right. Press and hold with your mouse, release it. All right. So before, release it, and after. Before and after. Okay. And you can see that the yellow really punched it up. Okay. If you don't like the green background, we can take that background and change it. All right. Here's another little thing. All right. We have the background is predominantly green. We can take the luminance slider, and because the majority of the background is green, we could have possibly just attacked that, just a green tone, and brought the luminance down. But you can see it's not by a lot. Okay, so probably won't work in this case. But let's take the saturation of a green. Let's boost it up a little bit. And maybe take it from a warm tone and bring it to a cooler tone. So we can take that green, and if we go one way, it kind of adds a little bit of magenta to it. If we go the other way, it adds a little cyan. Okay. Aqua's not doing anything. Yellow. It's not really doing too much. Blue, purple, nothing. All right. So just that green. Okay. So we can say, okay, if we shift the colors one way, it kind of becomes analogous to the colors in the turtle. And we go the other way, we're adding a little bit of color contrast because we're getting a little bit more into the cyan and away from the yellows. Okay. Make sense? All right. We could also play around with the saturation of those colors. Okay. So we can pump up the saturation to make those colors really pop, or we can tone down. You know, you don't want to go completely gray because then it's like, becomes overly gray, but we can control it to a certain extent. Okay. And I kind of like that. And probably, yeah, the red's not doing much. Okay. All right. Then the other thing I might do is just come in and crop in a little bit onto our turtles here. Okay. Where we want to crop to, salt and pepper to taste. All right, if you really want to really accent the turtles, okay, maybe something like this. I want to see a little bit of water on the bottom, and definitely a lot of water. All right, okay. Here's a little tip that I learned a couple years ago. In regards to composition with images like this, that I thought was rather interesting. All right. Now, obviously, the way you compose an image is going to be dependent on what the end use is. All right. I tend to, out of habit, make a lot of compositions that has some fairly open areas, because I never know when I'm going to need something that I can place text into. All right. And if you look at this image, I can very easily use this and put text into this image. But as a nature shot, where you really want to, just kind of accent the subjects themselves, this composition may not be the strongest. And here's a good little trick to consider. If you split, all right, if you split the composition in half, all right, in this case, I'm splitting it in half horizontally because all the elements are horizontal. The logs are horizontal. The turtles are arranged horizontally, okay? Split it right down the middle. So we have 50% above and 50% below, okay? And if we look at it, where is the majority of the interest in this image? It's in the lower half, all right? So all this area up here is doing absolutely nothing for us except forcing our eye down, okay? So this may not necessarily be the best composition, all right? A more central composition may be worth it, or maybe something that's a little bit tighter, all right, and we put more interest on the lower part, okay, something like this, where we now have something going on down here, all right, which is the reflection of the turtles, okay? But now you have to ask yourself, is that a distraction? Okay? Because again, where do we want our image, our eyes to go to? Right here. Okay? So if this is going to pull our eye down, we need to do something about it. Either crop in a little bit closer, which I don't want to do too much tight cropping because I kind of like the idea of the log, okay? But I also don't like the idea of having too much head space above the turtles, right? Okay. So maybe something like that. All right, so what can we do? Well, let's put some of this in shadow, okay? So I'm going to create another local adjustment. This time I'm going to go for a linear gradient, and I'm going to start from the bottom and drag it up pretty much kind of like there, right? And if we look at the exposures, the exposure values here, okay, we're going to see that we have a lot of midtones, and we have a lot of shadow area, okay? So if I were to use my whites, all right, it's not going to create a big effect. If I move my highlights, all right, it's literally doing nothing, okay? So we want to darken it. I'm going to go with my exposure, all right? And remember, it's doing it in a gradient, okay? So it's going to target that lower corner first, all right? And a lot more, all right, than the log itself, okay? We can stack it and see if the combination of exposure, whites, and highlights will do anything. All right, that kind of does it. All right, so now, let me remove that. Now you can see before, very contrasty, after, all right. Now our eye goes up, all right. That distraction in the bottom, the texture's there. The interest is there. It allows for the eye to explore it without pulling it down away from your main subject. Your eye is going to go to the main subject first and then down, all right? And as a matter of fact, I would even say this can probably benefit from another linear gradient coming in from the side, okay, where we can now, let me move that out of the way, where we can now knock some of the highlights down in that section, okay? Okay. All right. So now what we're doing is we're adding a little bit of shadow. Actually, no, not shadow. That's probably the wrong description. We are removing the intensity of the highlight on that section of the log all the way at the end there. Okay. We're reducing it down. Okay. All right, so now what happens, if we look at it, the majority of the bright area is right here, all right? And we've created a bit of a vignette, all right, by reducing the intensity of our highlights. We reduced the intensity of the highlights in the corner and along this edge, all right? Now, in particular, the edge one where the logs are is important because we have highlight that was just taking our eye completely out of the frame. All right. If we hadn't burnt that down, that highlight would have continued going off frame. So we would have landed on our turtles and then just follow that trail of highlights off to the right of the frame, okay? So this just kind of gently, very gently pulls us back in. Does that make sense? All right. Anybody got any questions on my approach to this? All right. Just basically controlling the light.
Duck, on the turtles on the top, they seem very bland. And the color, I love the color on the neck and the bottom. And you brought out the perfect example that is yellow, orange, and I thought that needed that come out. But what can you do about the top of the turtle shell?
Yeah,
Make it darker, bring
I,
out.
unfortunately, there's very little color up
Right.
there. Okay.
Well, a brush and darken. I'm just thinking.
All right. So, all right, let's figure this out. Okay. Let's figure this out. All right. Now, you have to keep in mind what we did in the first few steps was increase the contrast here, all right, because they were very close together, right? And we decreased the contrast here, all right? We increased here and we decreased there, all right? Because again, they were very far apart, okay? So we balanced it against the shell and we balanced it against the belly, right? Okay, so now, yeah, it's a little bland, all right? There's really no color there, all right? So how can we pull color? Let's go to I'm gonna just grab a brush and I'm just going to brush on that shell, all right? I'm gonna do the auto mask and see if that will just help a little bit so it doesn't go up onto the neck. Good. Okay. There we go. Take the auto mask off. All right. Close enough for government work, as they say, right? All right. Turn that off. All right. So you say darken the top of the shell. All right. That way, if there is any color information, if there is any, anything there, it'll come out. Okay. So All right. We are getting some texture. Okay. So that might work. Okay. Now that I'm seeing texture, it's making me want to go to my effects and see if I can pull some of that texture forward. Okay. Now, one of the things that I like in this particular panel, believe it or not, is the dehaze tool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because that's going to increase local contrast in that area, in the lights. Okay. Okay, so now we have that. Let's go ahead and zoom back out. All right. Okay. All right. So this will be salt and pepper to taste. Okay. I only did one. All right. So if we look at that turtle and compare it to this turtle, as far as which pulls your attention. Okay. It could be
They're
argued.
almost the same.
Yeah, it's almost the same. All right. The only difference is that we've reduced the contrast.
Mhm.
All right. Here, let me zoom back in. All right. Remember. All right. So I'll put these both side by side. Okay. Oops. What happened? I thought I zoomed in. There we go. Draw. Okay. All right. That's what we're looking at. Oops. Draw. Come on. Draw. All right. We have dark and we have light. Okay. And if we look at this, we have light and we have dark. Okay. Now we have dark to light to dark. Okay. And if we look at this, we have dark to an edge of light, very small light, back to dark. Okay. You might say that that is enough of a contrast to work with it. All right. And that may work for you. All right. Or you can say, you know what? What I'm seeing is dark to light to dark to dark. All right. And now the shell is starting to lose a little bit in terms of relation to the body. Okay. So how nitpicky do we want to get? Well, I can come back to my mask, all right, of that shell. Let me put this on, and I can go ahead and use the eraser tool and say, I'm going to erase. Let me bring my flow back up. I'm going to erase right along that shell edge, okay, to hopefully increase, right? Increase. Let's bring the flow back. Oh, what'd I do? I moved. There we go. All right, maybe we increase. Oh, here we go. That little edge there. Okay. I'm not quite liking that mask completely. That's what this prime example of why you should take your time with building your masks. Don't do what I'm doing is rushing your mask building in order to get to the lesson. all right? Because that's where you start making mistakes. Oops, see, making mistakes. I didn't hit the eraser. There we go. All right, there we go. So just a little bit on that edge. All right, and now we can play with that texture. All right, and we have dark to light to dark to light back to dark. Okay, so it gives us that nice definition of the shell. Make sense? All right. So personal preference. All right, let's try this. We'll add this to this shell. All right, let's go to our auto mask. That way we just kind of hit these bright areas here. All right, take the auto mask off. Make my brush a little bit smaller. Clean up these edges. All right, go to my eraser tool and I want to pull back a little bit. Bring that up. Pull back a little bit from that shell edge. All right, because I don't want to darken that shell edge because it worked really nicely on that other turtle, right? So we'll pull back a little bit. There we go. Take a look. Okay. All right, so before, after, before, after. Okay. All right, so actually works. All right, your suggestion was a great suggestion. All right.
How about a little bit more texture though on the same one?
Yeah. We can go ahead and let's go to our let's see, effects, texture. Yeah, we added texture. All right. Okay. Yeah, because I added it to the mask already. Okay. All right. So now, oh, come on, stop zooming in. All right. If we look at these two turtles in relation to the other two, okay. Do they stand out?
Yeah, it has a lot more of a story.
Okay. All right. Okay, let me take a quick 5 seconds. The brush will add a little bit here to the tops of these shells, top of that shell. There we go. Okay. Not too bad. I kind of like it. All right. Very nice.
I think the lower turtle on the left, number one turtle, benefited the most from that.
This one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? I want to zoom out to let's see, 33%. Let's go to 25%. There we go. Okay. All right, and then before, very contrasty. After, before, after. Yeah, big improvement. Okay. Your eye isn't fighting that harsh lighting, right? There's a lot of heavy contrast in the shadows. Again, you can see from the water to the tops of the shells to the underparts of the shells. Okay, here we balanced it out a little bit more. We've created that kind of like light to dark balance, okay, and really nicely pulls it forward, okay. The last thing I might do is I might just increase a little bit of the contrast just on the turtles. So if I create a circular gradient, angle it so that it hits my turtles a little bit, and just add, here, let's take the overlay off, and just add, punch up the highlights a little bit. Okay, before, after. All right, too much, too much. Because again, we gotta keep in mind that these are in bright sun, okay? Yes, no, maybe? Again,
Can you try saturation just like a 1/3 or now one twenty
global
fifth
saturation?
global?
Yeah, there you go.
I really like the colors of the bottoms of the
Yeah,
turtle.
yeah, yeah. That makes those turtles really stand out now.
Yeah, they look like turtles.
Yes, 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 yes. As a matter of fact, we can go back to our color mixer and maybe even push that yellow. Let's go to the luminance. All right, and let's take that yellow and see if we make it a little bit brighter without making it look like they're glowing. All right, make it a little brighter. There we go. Awesome. I like that. All right. So
Far out.
we've taken a image, something that's a little bit on the harsh side, and we've kind of rescued it. Okay. Any other questions with it, with any of this?
I noticed that you had that your camera is 100 to 200 Canon at
Uh,
100 ISO, and you
yeah.
had
This is my 70 to 200. Yeah.
and you had let's see, and you had it all the way out to 200. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Does that why the color was a little bleak or
No,
anemic?
the color was unsaturated because it was very bright.
Right.
The
Okay.
sun bleaches
Oh yeah.
colors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So um, one of the battles you guys probably experienced this
Mm-hmm.
when you're outdoors in screaming bright sun. You're fighting that balance of contrast between, making sure you have enough information in the highlights and not having your shadows go to black. Okay. As you know, digital, you want to favor the highlights more because digital sensors tend to lose detail in the highlights a lot faster than details in shadows. All right. So you have a little bit more leeway in the shadow parts of your images than you do in the highlights. All right. So one thing that I tend to do is, I don't want to be clipping on the highlights end too much, because once you clip, that's it. You're never regaining any information. All right. So oftentimes it's better to underexpose than to overexpose. All right. But in this case, like I said, I was shooting with a couple other people, and I was talking. I was distracted. I wasn't paying attention to my camera settings. We had just literally walked into the park. If anybody's ever been to O'Sullivan's Park in Derby, excuse me, as soon as you walk in, the main pond is literally right there. And it just so happens that these guys were just lounging out, and which is unusual because they're usually in the second pond, not in the main pond, which the second pond is a lot more isolated. All right. And like I said, they're very skittish. So if they see anybody, too close to the shore, they're going to jump and dive into the water. These guys were a little bit skittish, not too bad. But I was able to grab this, all right, and before moving on. So, like I said, kind of before I even had a chance to really set my camera, you know, I never would have done a 2.8. This is ridiculous, 2.8 for this. So, but I got it. And for all intents and purposes, I salvaged it, I think. Right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. All right. People or cars? If Bill was here, he'd be saying cars.
Let me speak for Bill then. Cars.
We'll do cars. Okay. We'll do the car. All right. How are we doing for time? Okay. All right. Here's one where, as you can see, in this case, I was shooting with my nice travel lens, which is a 24-105. It's a great all-purpose lens, and I am at f8. Okay, so if we look at all that background stuff, all right, that's fairly sharp focus. All right, so if we zoom in here, zoom in back here, all right, you can see how fairly in focus everything is. Okay, so in this particular case, I'm thinking I might want to reduce some of that distraction in the background by blurring it out. Make sense? All right. And then we have a very bright sky. All right. Now, by default, most skies are very bright, but we have to ask ourselves, is it so bright that it's distracting us? All right. So I might want to bring the exposure down on the sky a little bit. And if you see that there is a lot of texture there. So I might even just play around with some of that texture, see if I can bring it out a little bit more. Okay. And of course, we want to pull into the center. So I might want to burn the edges, burn the corners in, so that we bring our tension down. All right, so this, we're gonna bring down. All this detail in the back, we're gonna see if we can make it softer. Okay, all right. Now, the car itself looks pretty good. It might benefit from a little bit of contrast in the panels. All right. The car itself is very soft, doesn't have any hard lines to it. You see there, it's all the curves are very soft curves. All right. So what happens is, if we look at like this section here, there's very little delineation. We have a delineation here because it's a hard seam, but like in here and in here, where we rely on light and shadow to create form, it's not as prevalent. So we might want to create a little bit more form by adding contrast to the color. Make sense? All right. So let's attack the obvious. All right. We know that the sky needs to be brought down, and the nice thing is we have a nice selection that we can select our sky. All right, and we're going to go ahead and bring the exposure down. And now it's starting to look like it's nasty, overcast, cloudy, almost bordering on rain type of sky. So I might want to see if maybe if I introduce a little bit of blue, okay, make it more of a blue sky rather than a gray, rainy sky. All right, that looks a little bit better. All right, as a matter of fact, I might even just add a little bit of contrast. Oh, we touched upon it before, okay? Whenever you have contrasts, let me zoom in here, all right? We have sky against tree, all right? So we have light value against dark value, all right? The more of a difference we have between those two values, the higher the contrast, okay? So what we can do is we can say, okay, the sky is a light, a highlight value. The tree is a shadow value. So if I bring my shadows down and my highlights up, I'm going to increase the contrast. If I bring my highlights down and my shadows up, I'm going to decrease my contrast. Okay? But when we have all sky, all right, if we look at it, what we have is we have contrast just within the highlight section. All right. So if we look at the dark part, the darker gray areas, that's nowhere even near our midtone value. And if we look at the light value, that's nowhere near our whites value. Okay. So in essence, what we have is we have some contrast just in this slider alone. Okay? So we can't really rely on the other sliders to give us too much contrast. But fortunately, what we do have is, where is it? Effects. We have our dehaze. Dehaze is the tool that specifically attacks that highlight value in order to create contrast. So think of it as a contrast slider for your highlight tones. And look at that. Okay. And of course, we can go to extreme. Obviously, we don't want to go to an extreme because that looks fake. All right. But if we bring this down and we just add a little bit, okay, it allows some of that blue to come through and it doesn't look so scary, thundery anymore. Okay. All right. Before, after, before, after. All right. So we knocked it down a little bit, enough so our eye doesn't go up anymore, but not so much that we made it look like it's an impossible sky. Okay. All right. Next mask. I want to create a mask that, oh, no. Let's talk about how do we blur something out. All right. Because this is one of the new tools that just got introduced to Lightroom, and that's the lens blur. Okay. But the thing is, lens blur is a global effect, means it's going to affect the entire image. It is not, as of yet, a local adjustment. All right. So it's not like we can make a mask and say, let's blur this out. Okay. There are ways of doing that, and I'll show you in a second, but let's see what this new tool does. All right. So the first thing we got to do is we got to hit the apply button. All right. Now keep in mind, this is using AI. So it's going to send this up to the cloud. It's going to analyze it, and it's going to say, okay, based on what I've analyzed, I recognize these things as being in the background, these things being in the foreground, and so on. Okay. All right. So now it returns it, and if you really weren't paying attention, you're going to say, well, what did it do? All right. It actually did blur out the background by just a little bit. Okay. So one of the things that I suggest you do is you click on the visualize depth. Okay. And this allows us to really see what the depth map looks like. All right. So in this particular case, it's presented kind of like a heat map. All right, where the cooler tones tend to be the back, the warmer tones being towards the front. Okay. And we can manipulate this. All right. So we can say, okay, we're going to bring this more towards the front. All right. So if you notice, if I do this, the majority of the image is front to back. All right. But if I bring this more to the front, okay, it's bringing that focus closer to the front. Okay. And of course, we can narrow or expand what we want. Okay. So in this case, maybe I don't want, oh yeah, see, as I'm removing the grass in the foreground, it's also starting to take that front corner of the fender off. So I have to be careful. Okay. I don't want to, so I might just go to here. Okay. Once I have my heat map, all right, I'll take the visualize depth off, and now we can see how drastic that blur is. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, and I don't want to push it into the realm of unbelievability. Okay. Because you can see now it's starting to look like it might be a toy car, and you're using the tilt shift lens. All right. And we're getting some weird stuff with the tree branches in the back. All right. But if we keep it to a sensible blur, okay, we can see now a lot of that the distraction has disappeared. Okay. If we want to add elements, we can go ahead and click on the brush refinement. Okay. And we can select whether we want to add focus or add blur. All right. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and add blur. All right. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And this car in the background here, I'm going to kind of blur out along with that seat. Okay. So notice how now it's starting to match the blur of everything else. And I might hit this here as well. All right. It's probably one of those things that in reality, that's not quite true, but it's not so far out of the realm of reality that it's blatantly looking obviously out of context. Okay, I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. Size, and I'm going to increase my feather, and I'm just going to brush out, add blur to the ground in front. Okay. That might be a little bit too much. Okay. Let me undo that. Control Z undoes that. There we go. And I just might do just a little bit lower and in the corners. There we go. All right, just a touch of blur. All right, so that way, as our eye travels in this direction, we're going from sharp to blur. This is going to inform us that, hey, we're leaving the image. Let's go back. Okay, same thing with this. All right, all it's doing is returning the eye. Make sense? All right. We're also going to enhance that aspect of it, of returning the eye, by creating a little bit of shadow in those corners as well. All right. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and create another selection mask. This time I want to select my background. Okay, show overlay. All right. It missed this person there, so I'm going to go ahead and add with the brush. I'm going to go ahead and add that in. I'm going to add that in. I'm going to add this in. All right. I could be pedantic about it and add in the parts. Yeah, why not? We'll hit these little sections here. Okay. All right. And what I want to do is reduce the contrast in those areas. All right. We have a lot of bright areas that are just competing along with all that texture. We have all those bright spots that are competing and pulling our eye away. So I want to
Hey,
see
Doc,
what happens. Yes.
back up to your mask. There's some windshield from the Saab that got sucked in with the hood of the green car. See
Oh,
that there?
yes,
And
it
some of the
did.
wheels too.
All right. Okay. Good. Good to see. All right. I missed that. Yep. Perfect. 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 This is dark, so it's not. Oh, I see this area here. Yeah. Let me go ahead and zoom in. All right. Brush back. Let's go to flow. Brush back. That area. That area.
Doc, are you using your pad right now to do this?
My pen. Yeah.
Yeah,
Pen
okay.
tablet.
I was
Yeah.
wondering why it's
As
so
you
accurate.
as you can see, yeah, it makes my selections a little bit easier. Okay, so zoom back out. Okay, there we go. All right, it got the grass here. I'm not too concerned with that because my main goal for this particular mask is just to reduce the contrast. All right, so if I reduce the contrast a little bit, reduce the shadows, okay, or open the shadows a little bit. There we go. Okay, and it might be a little bit too much. Okay. All right, you know what? I want to subtract the sky because it's affecting the sky. So I'm going to hit subtract, select sky. There we go. I don't want it attacking the sky. All right. So before, after, before, after. Okay, subtle, but it removes some of that distraction. Okay, because now we can now concentrate on our main subject, which is the car. All right, and what I want to do with the car is what? Increase some of the contrast to see if we can create a little bit more of that form to pop forward. Okay, so objects, I'm gonna go ahead and paint on my object here, this, okay, and it should select it, all right. Boom, 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 boom. All right, show overlay. Mask, there we go. Good. Oh, it got a little bit of the background there. So what we're going to do is brush, subtract, remove that. Alt, put that back in. There we go. Okay. And now take the overlay off. We want to increase our highlights a little bit. And let's bring the shadow down. Oh, yeah, look at that. Suddenly we have curves popping forward. Okay. The blacks, let's open the blacks up just a touch. Anything in the whites? Oh, little balance between the whites. Let's bring our highlights down and just bring the whites up. Oh, okay. All right. One thing that I don't often talk about is mental block. I know what I want to say. I just can't remember the term. Not surface fidelity. Surface. Basically, how we can determine what the material is that the object is made from. Okay. And that is given to us by the way light reflects off of a substrate, okay? Something that has a lot of specular highlights tend to represent something that's fairly shiny, all right? And that's the case with this particular car. So we want to increase that specularity in order to have the subject come across as being a reflective metallic surface, right? All right, that's why I'm kind of increasing the highlights area, all right? So if we toggle the mask off and on, all right, you can see that I really punched up the highlights, okay? The other reason I punched up the highlights, you know, obviously it adds to the fact that it's going to give contour, all right? And I apologize because I think the video is a little bit more contrasty than what I am actually seeing on my screen. But we have to keep in mind that what is causing these highlights on this car? It's the sky above, right? Which we can see in our image, all right? So the law of angle of incidence, angle of reflection, the angle of reflection we are seeing in the top part of the car is actually the sky in the background, okay? So that background sky is being reflected, okay? Whereas the lower part of the car, what is that reflecting? Well, it's reflecting everything behind me here, all right? That is people, other cars, trees that may be on the side of the lot, all right? All of that is below the horizon. As a matter of fact, we can see our horizon on this particular panel because we can see it trees here, all right? These are all the distant trees, okay? And this is sky, and this is ground, all right? So the angle of reflection, angle of incidence plays an important part in creating that dimension. All right, so we want to make sure, oh, here on the front hood, we can see the trees being reflected. All right, so we want to make sure that we use that to our benefit. So in this particular case, we have a bright sky. That bright sky is going to be bouncing off the top of our car. So we don't want those highlights to be so reduced that now it kind of looks like you're in a softbox, you know? How much contrast you want? Salt and pepper to taste, okay? Again, I have to say that looking at my monitor, it looks like the contrast is a lot more coming across than what I'm actually seeing on my screen, okay? All right. And that's pretty much it. So now we can definitely see the shape of that car. All right, let's close that out. Do a before. All right, before wasn't bad. All right, this is not a bad shot. All right, so it really didn't take much to take it from here to here. Okay, so you can see we added contrast on the main, the green car, and we kind of pushed everything else a little bit further back. Okay.
Hey, Doc,
Yep.
I have a suggestion on how to vastly improve this picture.
Yes. Go for it.
And we can demonstrate the generative remove. Get rid of that guy with the matching green shirt.
Here, here.
Okay, we can do that. All right. We'll do that last. There's a couple of little steps that I want to do. I'm going to go back to my car mask. All right. And this, I think, is going to benefit from a little bit of clarity and texture. And I pumped up the dehaze just a touch. All right. And now, all right, because what are the three things that I always say you need to edit in your images? Your exposure, your color, and your texture. All right. So we handled the background texture by softening it up. So now the subject set texture, we sharpened it up a little bit. Okay. So we have that nice contrast of colors. All right. As a matter of fact, if we wanted to, we can go to our background mask. Actually, let me go ahead and rename that background. Okay. And we can, if we want to, and again, it may work, it may not work, let's desaturate it just a touch. All right. Not so much that we're removing color, but we are reducing it in order to bring the main color forward. Okay. But yeah, that guy right there still stands out. Okay. So, all right. And then last one that I want to do, which I mentioned before, is I want to kind of burn these corners down. Okay. So I'm going to go bring the exposure down on this. Okay. And notice I put this at an angle. All right. What I'm going to do is, if I do Control Alt, I don't know what it is for you Mac people, and I drag, what I'm actually doing is I'm duplicating that mask, or I'm sorry, that gradient tool, but keeping it within the mask. All right, so I have both in the same. So that way I can create this kind of like just hitting the corners without having to build a second mask. And they all share the same adjustment. So one adjustment targets both corners. Okay. All right. Okay, Brian, your suggestion of eliminating this guy. Okay. Well, we have a little bit coming through the window. If we remove it, does that become a problem? Probably not. We might want to do something with it, later. All right. But let's give this a try. Okay. All right. The remove tool is one of our local adjustments. All right. The first one is our AI remove. It's not AI until you click on this first button here, though. Okay. Generative AI. Okay. And we'll click on object aware because we wanted to kind of analyze this and see if we can remove it. So I'm going to go ahead and, all right, my computer's slowing down on me a little bit. So my brush is going to take a little bit of catching up to do. All right. And if I return back to the beginning and I let go, it should create a selection for me. All right. And then we'll just go hit apply. Sends it up to the cloud. Adobe does its thing, and it's going to reply back with 3 choices. Oh, that's not too bad. It's something a little bit
That's
funky.
great.
Huh?
That's great.
All right, that's the first one. All right, and if we look right here, the variations, 1 of 3 with with arrows. So we go to the second one. Well, that's not too bad either. And the third one. Oh, I think that one's the best. First, or I'm sorry, that's the first. That's not too bad. Okay. Second, not too crazy about the second one because that's a big white spot. Third one, it makes it look like that is actually a car there, like a windshield, which was kind of missing from the first one. I don't mind that one.
That's good.
All right, so that's it. We got our distraction gone. All right, so now that little yellow coming through, is that a distraction? Well, you know what? We can always create a mask, pick a brush, target that yellow, and we can either burn it down a little bit, or we can see if we can, let's desaturate it. All right, and bring the highlights down. Let's bring the exposure back up. All right, bring the highlights down on that. Bring the whites down, see if that does anything. Yeah. All right, we got to be careful with the edges. Or we can try to remove it completely. Oh, there we go. All right, let's see what happens with non-generative AI. Let's see what happens. Yeah, refresh. Refresh. Yeah, no, oh. No, that looks weird. That looks weird. Okay, so we'll get rid of that. All right. The nice thing about that little spot right there is it is small, so
Now with all that other stuff in the windshield, your eye doesn't really get drawn to it, or mine doesn't that
yeah.
much.
Yeah.
compared to that big green guy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, okay. Before, not bad. After, before, after. All right. Now, of course, you know my opinion. When it comes to more intricate removals, that's where I'll go to Photoshop. So, for example, that white card that's on the windshield, you know, if you want that gone, uh, Lightroom won't take care of that. All right, that'll create a mess. I'm not even going to try because I already know it. All right, but Photoshop, we can do a much better job of removing that and maintaining the integrity of the interior. Okay, so any questions on this one?
I have a comment, not a question.
Sure.
When you first started and you showed that dark cloud, sometimes how right before a storm and it gets cloudy, things like this, colors seem to pop out.
Yes.
And if you're trying to go with maybe a surreal thing to really show this thing off, I think a foreboding sky might do it well. If you're playing around with doing something like that.
Yep. Yep.
Just now,
Absolutely.
once you've gotten rid of the folks in the background. Anyway, it's neat how it separated that from the just that general background and fuzzed it out nicely.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we're playing with those three elements, exposure, color, and texture. All right. And this image, this edit pretty much targets all three of those. So, all right, Max, you're the new guy. Any questions? Any comments?
No, no.
Hopefully give you some inspiration,
Yes.
you know. So, all right. We're almost near the end, so I'm not even gonna attempt a third one. Unless you want me to do it really, really quick. We can do something like this, which is super simple. Just select the subject. All right. And bring the exposure up a little bit. Maybe bring the contrast up. Let's turn the highlight off. Okay. Add another mask for our background. Where's our select background? All right. Show the overlay. All right. And maybe, I know what. We'll do a intersect. We'll intersect it with a radial gradient. All right, in order to create a vignette. All right, so I'm going to just bring this right here. All right, show the overlay. All right, what I want to do is I want to invert this radial mask. All right, so now what we're doing is we're selecting the outer part. And now let's turn that off. Now we can burn that down. Oh, I said I was going to show you how to add a little bit of blur without using the blur tool. Okay. And that is a combination of the texture and clarity. All right. Obviously, if we move it to the right, it's going to add texture, it's going to add clarity. But if we do it to the left, it's going to remove texture. All right. In particular, the texture. Clarity tends to add a kind of a glow effect. So be careful with that. And then in the detail, we can take the detail and bring the sharpness down. All right. And you're going to see in particular, take a look at the base here when we turn it off and on. All right. Notice how a lot of that texture disappears. All right. So it kind of softens it to the eye. All right. doesn't quite give you that lens blur effect, but when you're looking to subtly manipulate textures and you need to soften something up in order to bring a little bit more textural contrast, like in this case, that's another way of doing it. All right. So before, after, before, after. Okay. Very simple. All right. And that took what? 3 minutes. I think that took like 3 minutes. Okay. All right.
Well, I just got to say that reverse vignette was no intersecting vignette. Intersection you just did was, I'll have to watch that a couple more times.
Mm-hmm.
And the where you made the vignette on the bottom in the previous car picture. I like that when you did the.
Yeah, because, you know, a linear gradient is going to create a straight line. And actually, let me go back to the car, right? And the reason why this works is because if we look at the silhouette of the car comes down to a point, all right? And if we were to have done a radial, oops, come on, why? I don't want that thing there, and for some reason, all right, oh, anyway, a radial gradient would have given me a very even straight across, which would have put the shadow very close to this point here, all right? That would have created a tangent that would have looked really weird, in my opinion, all right? So by able to create a shape that matches our subject, all right, it creates a more natural looking vignette, all right. Now I could have done it with a circular gradient, but I didn't want to darken the upper corners, all right, and a circular gradient would have done that unless I went really big and off the page. But
Doc, if
that's
you're
it.
doing a circular radiant, and as you mentioned before, the sky highlights the top of the car, tops of the fenders, and so on and so forth. Can you bring that the brightness down? To me, if you bring the brightness down, like on a right rear quarter panel and the roof and the hood, you might get more distraction or more detail.
This,
Yeah, all the way across the top, from the nose all the way to the back.
oh, this part here.
Yes, and up to the roof, and on the roof. See the bright spots, the hood, the tops of the fender.
Oh, yeah, I actually brought the highlights up on purpose.
Okay.
All right. And you say bring it down?
Only because of color. I rather see a green
Okay.
versus a shine.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, like I said, the video's coming across a little bit more contrasty than it really is.
Okay.
On my
Okay.
side, it, you know, here, let me see if I can
I
illustrate it
understand.
here.
Yes.
All right. I think my screen looked more like this, you know, so, all right. Does that look better to you?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
looks a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see more detail in the hood and also the right part of the hood.
Yep.
That's
Okay.
that looks great. That looks great.
Perfect. You know, uh, and yeah. Uh, and now, of course, you know, depending on your, um, the how to put this, um, depending on the subtleties that you want to now include into this, we can take it even more micro and say, okay, let's see if we can just, like, for example, target the grill and maybe, add a little punch to the grill.
Yeah.
Do the individual headlights, okay? Because the headlights are kind of getting a little lost here, all right?
Yeah.
So you can go that minute with your edits. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, so here we can say, okay, in this particular case, what I want to do is I want to see if I can get a little bit more contrast to kind of show the headlight a little bit more, right? So I might punch the highlights. Actually, you know what? I might punch the exposure and bring the shadows down, all right, to create that contrast. All right, so now we close that out. All right, see how that stands out a little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot better.
So you can finesse it depending on, how refined your eye is. Okay. I kind of hit broad strokes with some of these edits, but there's no reason why you can't take that same fundamentals, all right, and instead of large groups, like background, car, all right, we reduce it to local elements, the grill, the headlight, the
Yeah.
rims. Oh my
The rim
God.
there. Yeah.
Let's tackle this rim here right in front. I'm sure. Let's add a circular gradient to that.
Let's make it sparkle.
Let's absolutely. All right. So, we'll take this, make sure that we get fairly close to doesn't have to be exact. Okay. And we bring up, what was it? We brought up the exposure, brought down the shadows a little bit. Okay. All right.
That's getting there. That's getting there.
Look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes that pop.
Yeah.
Look at that compared to the one in the back. All right. So
Yeah,
now,
baby.
right. So now what we can do is we can use that trick. All right. So all it is, all right, when you have the mask selected, okay, all it is where is it? Oh, duplicate.
Mask 6.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to duplicate it. What I want to do, let me.
Well, that was intersect the mask, wasn't it?
No.
Okay.
There used to be. It's not intersect. Wow, it's no longer on the menu. Control Alt. All right, you press and hold. You got to press and hold the Control Alt key. For Mac, you might have to play around. It might be the Alt option. The option, whatever key. And notice that I can drag it around. All right, and it maintains that one, but it makes a duplicate within the same mask. So now I can just take this down, manipulate this on its own, and apply it to that rear wheel. Okay. All right. And oops. Before, after. Before, after.
What was that again? Control Alt.
Control Alt, and then you drag. All right,
You
click and
click
drag.
on it and drag it.
Yep. And what it does is it creates a copy of that. Oh, I know where it is. Da 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 da. I was looking in the wrong menu. Here's the radial gradient, the first one that I created. You click on that. There it is. You duplicate your radial gradient. All right. That's all you're doing is you're duplicating it and you're moving it to a new location. All right. The shortcut is the Control Alt or Option. What is it? Alt is Option. Control is Command. Command Option. All right. It might be the same in for you Mac people. I'm not. Don't hold me to it. Okay. We can take a brush. I'm just killing time at this point here, but take a brush and we can paint right on that. Where is our show mask? There we go. There we go. Take that off. And bring up the exposure. Bring down the shadows. Okay. Now, you have to remember, you have to watch your balance within the whole scope of the vehicle, all right? But just that by itself, that's adding a little bit of punch.
Yep.
I'm kind of liking it. You know? All right, guys. That's pretty much it for today's class. Hopefully you got something out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Next week is Photoshop. If anybody wants to do anything specific. All right. Oh, somebody's I'm getting feedback. There you go. Thank you, Bob. Bob knows it's him. Did you have a question, Bob? Is that why you had your mic open? No? Okay.
No, I was just saying I got a lot out of this.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Don't forget, put it into practice. All right. And start incorporating these tools into your workflow. All right. That's it. Next week, Photoshop. If anybody has anything specific they want me to cover, send me a note. Otherwise, I'll wrangle something up. All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out with me. We'll see you next time.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Later.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.